What are vegetable oils? These are vegetable oils, the ones that are most commonly known, really. Soybean oil is the one that is really the main contributor to the oils we eat. And they're not really vegetable oils. I mean, it sounds so lovely, doesn't it? You know, I always wonder about what PR room came up with the word vegetable oils. They're not made from vegetable oils. Vegetables, like broccoli or anything, they're made from seeds and beans. They actually should be called seed oils. Of course, they're not natural. These are the natural fats that humans ate for millennia. There's tallow, which comes from cows, and suet from lambs. Lard these are really the two main ones that were used in cooking in the West. Lard from pigs, and of course butter. In other societies, in Asian societies, they also used coconut oil and palm oil. Those are traditional fats. Vegetable oils of any kind, were really not used for human consumption. They were used for industrial machinery as lubricants. In the Industrial Revolution, I mean, first it was really whale oil from the 1820s to the 1860s, and they were used for machinery. And then when we killed all the whales, we moved over to cottonseed oil, which was a byproduct. You know, the cotton was a huge crop in the southern United States, and they didn't know what to do with the leftover oil, so they started using that to replace whale oil. And it was not a food. This oil was used a little bit in the late 1800s to adulterate butter, to kind of sneak it in, but here's the problem with oils and human consumption. They are not stable. They're greasy and oily. So this is just to show you the chemistry. A saturated fatty acid has no double bonds in there between the carbon molecules, and so it's straight. A double bond makes a chink in the chain, but if it's saturated, meaning it's saturated with hydrogens, there are no double bonds. So that's straight and flat, and those molecules can sit on top of each other all together, and there's no space between them, and so they make solids. Saturated fats are solid. Whereas unsaturated fatty acids, this is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Poly means multiple double bonds between the carbons, and they're unsaturated because if you broke this bond and you could add hydrogens here. So it's not saturated with hydrogens. And those molecules don't lie flat together. They're all squiggly and wiggly, and so there's space between them, and therefore they're oils. That's the basic chemistry. So in order to use oils as foodstuff, they had to make them straight. And they did this through a process called hydrogenation. So they took oleic acid, they straightened it out through a process called hydrogenation. And hydrogenation is a very complex process that involves all kinds, in huge factories. I actually have been in a hydrogenation factory. There's just floors and floors of machinery, and they use metal catalyst and the hexane solvent, and then they go through this incredibly long process, because really when you take seeds or beans and you press them, what comes out is this rancid gray liquid, and then you have to make that palatable. So you have to deodorize it and winterize it so it's stable, and you have to go through all these steps. That process is what allowed vegetable oils to come into the food supply. And that happened because once it could be stabilized, actually when they first stabilized, this is Procter & Gamble, who were originally soap makers and tallow makers, and when they first stabilized cottonseed oil in the early 1900s, about 1910 or so, when this process was discovered, they looked at that and they said, oh, we'll sell that as soap. And actually a lot of your soaps are made from oils. That's what a lot of soaps are. And then they looked at it and they said, well, that actually looks a lot like lard. Why don't we try to sell it as lard? And this is in 1911. So they figured that out, and they had a number of names they eventually landed on this idea of Crisco. And that was the introduction of vegetable oils as a commercial product into the human food supply, really. That was really the beginning of it as a commercial product.